Greetings, everyone. How's everybody doing today? It's good to see you. Just waiting for my Facebook thing here to catch up so that I know for sure that everything is good. Yep, it looks good. Okay, great to see everybody. Welcome again to another one of my question and answer deals. I really enjoy these. Thanks for your questions, you guys. I don't remember if the last time I gave one of these I had my office set up, but I do have it set up now since moving. So I'm pretty excited about that. So let's just jump into it and go from there. All right, first question from Heather Brockman. I'm looking for the best way to get around employees having clients' personal information. So what do I need? A company phone, Google Voice, etc. Business description, background. I'm having an issue with former employees breaking a legally binding contract and reaching out to clients and would like a workaround so they are not able to access this information, if that's even possible. I chuckle because I've dealt with that exact same issue, as I believe we all have. So there are some things that you can do. So one of the things that we did in one of the companies that I was involved with, that I founded and handed off to CEO pretty fast, but I feel like they had a pretty good solution for that. For our grant writing company for nonprofits, we basically use all outside contractors to do the grant writing, and so we didn't want them to have direct connection to the clients. So what we did was, well, in our case, it's all digital, so we didn't have to physically even see them. So we actually created a whole software system that basically manages the whole entire process. So between the account manager, the customer, and the grant writer, there's never any direct communication. It's all through this portal with like checklists of things that have to be done and like questions that had to be answered and all that sort of stuff. But what we did do, which is applicable for you, is we actually bought a Nextiva phone system, which is a VoIP phone system, and you don't have to use Nextiva. I'm sure that any of the major ones have the same situation. And with Nextiva, what was cool about it was you were able to set up apps on everybody's phone that would give them like a virtual phone, so that way then the client, if they wanted to even call the grant writer directly, was calling our number, not the grant writer's number. And you could do the same thing. So like you could have Nextiva apps on everybody's phones, which allows you to kind of like create a switchboard system. And then whenever anybody calls in, they call in on your main line or they call into the individual lines, but they're all your numbers that they're calling into. And so that way, if a client or if a employee ever leaves, you just turn off their app or give their app to somebody else, their phone number to somebody else. It's not unusual for people to try and take clients when they're interacting in person. There's going to be a certain level of that's going to be difficult to overcome, but you do the best you can with contracts, you do the best you can with technology, and then I think that's it. But we've done well with that Nextiva phone system. It's worked well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I've done along those lines. No, and honestly, there's going to be some issues with that. There's always going to be some issues with that. Some of it's just a cost of doing business. The best thing that I think you can do is make sure that your brand is strong and that your customers are interacting with you at some point too, not just the person who services them. So if there's a way to have an account manager or somebody like that interact with the client as well, other than just the person doing the production part of it, that's always a good way to build into the system, so that way then there's more of a connection to the company as a whole, an interaction, a reason to interact with the company that creates value as opposed to just the person who's producing the actual work. Yeah, I think I could come up with some ideas for that if I thought about it. But that would be my thing, is how does the company drive value so that the person leaving on their own would not be able to recreate that same value, would be my thought. Okay, on to the next question. Derek Lacrone. How do I cash out, sell an earned financial membership equity in a startup company I worked with in 2018, 2019? Thank you. I am uncertain of exactly how to discover the value of the financial membership and then how I would seek out a buyer for it. I can imagine selling it back to the company is one option as they are fundraising, and maybe another option is to seek outside investors. Is it even still worth something because they have changed their business structure since then? Thanks. All right, Derek. Good question. So, whenever you're valuing anything, it doesn't matter if it's a startup or if it's an existing business or if it's a house or if it's a car or anything like that. Um, if you're valuing it from a financial perspective, it really comes down to how much money does it earn currently, or how much money could it potentially earn in the future. Startups, of course, are based on potentially earned in the future. So it's a lot more gray than something that's producing current income, like say you bought a rental property or something like that. That's a little bit easier to calculate. So my question to you is well, what when you ask what is the value, is are they making revenue now? Did they not make revenue before? Is the business in a better place than it was when you worked there? When you worked with them? It sounds like they changed their business structure, which is fine. That might have been a good thing, and now they're making money and everything's great. So in terms of determining the value, that's really what would factor into my determining what the value is. If they're still not making any money and it's just they're floundering around and like they really haven't gotten anywhere, to an outside person it's probably not worth anything, unless of course they're doing like really great fundraising and they've told this great story and for some reason everybody's on board with it. I'd have to hear what their story is, but if it's just one of those things where they gave you equity and you guys worked on some stuff together and it didn't really go anywhere, it's probably not worth anything to outside investors. It's probably more worth something to the people who are in the business, right? Like they may not want you as like a floating partner out there. I've actually seen that before where they give people equity, the relationship sours or otherwise goes away, and then they actually just want to get the person out because they just have like this attachment to their company, and even though their company is kind of crap, and isn't really going anywhere, they still want to own all the equity. I got to own everything. So sometimes that's been a good approach to just try to get a little bit of money out and be like, hey, look, I'll sell this back to you for some number. And then if the person has the some number, then, you make a deal. And if not, you say, okay, well, no problem. I'll just hold on to it and, wait till the company's worth a lot of money and then I'll sell it then, and then hopefully you can convince them to take it off your hands. But it really probably isn't worth anything unless they're either currently making some sort of revenue and like the business is actually looking like a real business, or that they've got some sort of something going for them, because there's like a million startups that are really just uninvestable because they have nothing going for them other than an idea. And you always hear about the ideas that get bought for $1 billion by Facebook, but that's a 1 in a million type situation. There's the other million which are really worth nothing. So I don't know. I'd have to know more about it. You can reach out to me. Reach out to Sean. Oh, by the way, speaking of that, I don't know if everybody knows this, but I work with a bunch of different AOers one-on-one on like a weekly basis. So if anybody thinks that would be valuable to them, I would recommend, whether it's me or somebody else. It's if you're kind of on your own and you're doing this plugging away trying to figure it out, it really does accelerate things when you have somebody that you're kind of working with on a weekly basis to be able to, or even bi-weekly or monthly, even whatever it is, to just check in and get that deeper understanding. Because right now, you guys ask these questions and I love answering them, and I'm but I can really get into the nitty gritty when I actually know what's going on. And I can follow like the chain of what's the events that's been happening week after week, month after month. I have some AOers I've been with probably for well over a year at this point. And I treat them just like any of my other companies, like the CEOs that I work with or the companies that I'm invested in. And honestly, some of the AOers may become companies I'm invested in too as time goes by. So that's what it's about. Anyway, just throwing that out there. It really is great stuff. I enjoy it, and the companies are moving very quickly that have those types of relationships. And I have those types of relationships too, by the way. And I know that the other mentors do too. Like we all have mentors. Mentors have mentors, right? Like that's the whole point of this stuff, because you need to get that perspective. You need to get that access to those other networks You have to just get, one brain is better than two. I mean, two brains is better than one, or whatever the saying is. Um, so yeah. Anyway, just throwing that out there. Cool. Next thing from Zach Knock. What are some creative ways to get financing if you can't get traditional bank financing? Great question. My company, Diamond State Technology, specializes in working with access control automation, cameras, and security systems for both residential and commercial applications. The reason for my question is my company is going to hit a stopgap the first week of July. We did sell a large project. I'm in the process of hiring 4 employees for this project. I'm going to need financing of $50,000 to $75,000 to cover existing overhead and to mobilize my new crew to the site. This will only be temporary until the invoice for the project hits my account 30-ish days later. Thank you, mentors, for your irreplaceable knowledge and insight on how to navigate the growth I'm experiencing. Zach actually is one of those people that I've been working with for a pretty long while now, and we actually worked through this project, through this exact question. And so, but just kind of in general for everybody. So you've got a couple different options. You get a big job, and you've got to, finance it. First, know what your financing requirements are. 9 times out of 10, people don't know that they're out of money until all of a sudden they're out of money. So remember, running out of money is not necessarily a bad thing. It could be a sign of good things, which is like rapid growth, right? If you're low on cash because your business is growing, that just means you need to be better with your finances and be able to see it coming so that you can prepare, as Zach is doing here, to know what his cash flow shortfall might be because of his rapid growth. So like in this particular example, you got a couple options. So you signed a big contract. You can do PO financing. There are a lot of guys that will finance PO. A lot of companies will finance PO. I finance POs. They'll finance, and then you can also do it on the other side too, of course. You could do AR financing as well. Now, warning, AR financing, or otherwise known as factoring, can be a slippery slope. Any of these types of financing things can be a slippery slope. They're good in a pinch, but looking for long-term solutions is much better if you can pull it off. So like Zach suggested, if you can't get bank financing, there are these other options. If you're in a high margin business, honestly, the PO and the AR stuff can work plenty fine. But if you're in a tight margin business, it's going to eat you up real fast and may take away a lot of your margin. So AR financing, PO financing, private investors who want to invest into the company, either short or long term, I've got structures for that. Bank financing, if you can get some working capital. Honestly, credit cards are great. Like one of the things, like if you've got credit cards get a bad rap in like the mainstream conversation because people misuse them. But there's nothing wrong with using a credit card. Like in Zach's example, here's a perfect example. He said that he's gonna outlay a bunch of cash in order to buy all the equipment he needs, and then once the customer pays, which will be about 30 days later, then he's going to get all the money back, right? That's a perfect example. If you can buy that stuff with a credit card, like it's going to cost you 0% to finance that, right? Because you're going to pay your vendor. Let's say he buys $50,000 worth of stuff on day one, and it takes your credit card statement, depending on when it closes and how much time you have to pay, you could have almost 60 days of interest-free financing on whatever the credit card is. Now, this is assuming you have a credit card that has 50 or 75 or 100 grand worth of, credit available, but you can build to that. You can make that happen. I showed this to Zach. We were talking about, see this batch right here? There's nothing on any of these, but I always just keep them on my desk here. There's probably like $500,000 worth of credit right here, but I just keep them right there. I don't do anything with them, but there they are, like if I need them, for this exact type situation that Zach is describing. So there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're able to then pay it off before the interest kicks in, basically. Or at least in some measurable time frame, because the rates are generally high on credit cards. Generally, if you actually have really good credit, you might even have business credit cards that are only like 9% or 8%, something like that, especially in today's kind of low rates world. So anyway, so those are usually kind of cheap and quick ways to kind of get things done if you're talking very short time frames. But over the long term, you're going to want to either you're going to either have cash influx because of you brought in outside investment, or like bank debt, like a line of credit, is probably going to be the most long-term kind of cost-effective way to do it. But managing your finances is important to know how much you need and that you can kind of like get the timing of everything right. Again, that's something a lot of times that I talk about with the folks that I work with on a regular basis, and including my own companies. Okay. Next question, Lindsay Lennon. How do I get my product in front of a corporate client? I own a truffles company and want to get involved in corporate gifting. I'm looking to get my product in front of small business owners and corporations to get bulk orders and subscription orders. Great question, Lindsay. Lindsay and I talk a lot about this exact question. One of the things that we've talked about is that you got to connect through networks, right? Like when you're trying to connect with corporate clients, you're very good about it's important to be able to try to get that direct connection, because just you could try cold calling, you could try ads and all that sort of stuff, which is maybe productive. I don't know. You could probably spend a lot of money trying to figure that out. But what I found to be the case is that if you could connect through the right organizations that have already the folks that are thinking the way that you need them to be thinking in order to buy your product, that's the way to go. So like, for example, one of the things that we talked about with Lindsay was the idea of executive assistants, right? So executive assistants are probably the people who are buying, and this came up because my executive assistant does this. She sends me a text and it's like, oh, hey, it's my buddy Noah's birthday, not her buddy, my buddy. My buddy Noah's birthday coming up next week. Do you want me to send him something? I wasn't even thinking about it. She's the one who was thinking of it. I'm like, yeah, cool, send him something. Your budget's $100 or whatever. And I didn't really want to think beyond that. And so that type of relationship is common. So our thought was, well, this is a gifting product for corporate gifting. And so let's talk to the people who actually buy the gifts, like the people who actually make the decision. Like, so calling the CEO is probably not really going to be very productive, where the person who actually has to get the task done, who has the money to spend, that's the person that we talk to. So trying to think through kind of big picture who these people are, and like kind of at the point where they actually need what you're selling, that's the conversation to have. And then and how do you get in front of them in a very direct way, like where there's this kind of like referral network or giant kind of like network that exists. So we basically, our strategy on that was just to go on to Upwork, look for a bunch of executive assistants, and then just reach out to them and say, hey, look, I'll pay you your hourly rate to talk to me and see if you give us some information on how you work and what you think of how this idea would work in your executive assistant community. And we actually got a lot of good data from doing that. So, anyway, that's one of the ideas. I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, it's all about networks. You got to be able to create networks as you go. Okay, AJ Coates. How do you know when it's time to fire a client? In my online marketing agency, there are two specific clients who consistently are frustrating to deal with. Their communication standards do not exist. When they need something, they expect our undivided attention at the expense of anything else, and they consistently struggle to pay us on time. Both can afford us. It's not a cash flow issue. I'm at the point where I'm ready to be done with them mentally, but firing them would reduce our monthly revenue by about 30%. I'm struggling with the idea of losing that much revenue, but gaining so much time back. Okay, great question. So, here we go. You just did a little bit of a cost-benefit analysis, and you said that you're going to lose 30% of your revenue if you fire these two clients. I have a friend's business who just fired their top-earning sales guy, basically. It wasn't a sales guy, but basically produced revenue. Maybe not 30%, but call it 10 or 15%. It's a big company, so it's a meaningful number. They just fired that person, and it's a lot of good riddance. They're gone. And I say that because part of having a culture in your business there's this kind of soft stuff of, hey, this is the culture we want, these are the customers we want, and those customers have to fit into the culture just the same as our employees have to fit into the culture. And if these guys are jerks and not fitting the, what you're going for, then they are indeed not a good fit. That alone. But now here's the finance side of it. The finance side of it is that, I would guess that revenue is not profitable or not as profitable as everybody else's due to the communication issue problems, the wanting the undivided attention, the distracting you from other things you should be doing because they just keep having these fire drills. If you factor in the direct cost associated with all that mess, and you factor in your opportunity cost by not focusing on the things you should be focusing on, I would guess that 30% of revenue is not profitable for you. So even if you lost it, then you can take that focus and you can put it somewhere else on something that is going to be profitable for you. I would imagine it would be profitable within a few days of firing those clients. That's been my experience, that the opportunity cost is astronomical. You focus on just what you'd be losing in terms of like top line revenue, but direct costs and opportunity costs together, when you look at those two customers, and if you're asking the question and saying that you're struggling with the idea of losing that much revenue but gaining so much time back, you already know the answer. You're already thinking that way. It's more the emotional block that that's holding you up. So anyway, I would just do the calculation on the finance side, and that usually make me help me feel better about it, because it's pretty easy to justify from a dollars perspective on why you might want to get rid of them. Okay, Holly Moore. How do I structure this business? Companies such as Pure Romance, Bedroom, Kandi sell the toys, but not the services and showing people how to connect, or tips and tricks on how to make your partner happy. I have a company called New Sext, where I'll teach virtual romance or intimacy service. This is not like any other product. Pleasure New Sex Ed encourages women and men, couples, to love themselves and explore their beauty of their sexuality. I do this by going deep in their mind and soul, blossoming the essence of romance using training and products and services. Cool. So, how do I structure this business? Okay. I need more information. This is a great opportunity for you to give me more information at some point, but you're not here. So I'm doing this on my own. When I hear structure, I kind of think of organizational structure or maybe legal structure. So then I'm thinking LLCs versus corporate, or I'm thinking those sorts of things. I'm not sure if that's your question or not, but if I got that right, I would say LLC, just because it's generally the answer. Unless you're going to start a public company, which you can always adjust an LLC to be more of a corporate entity later when you get that big. But yeah, so that's one thing. The other thing that I think of is, how do I structure this business? My mind immediately went to how do you do what you do at scale structurally, because you're not going to want to do this onesie twosies, because then you're just going to be you'll eventually just max out your own hours, and then that'll be it. You can only charge so much per hour for what you're doing. As with most things, you can only charge so much per hour for whatever anybody's doing. So structure on that is I would think that it would be some sort of virtual learning platform where you can have multiple people participating at the same time. So you might be charging, I don't know, $50, $150, $500 for the training session or whatever. And then allowing people to kind of interact, maybe not with each other necessarily. I don't know, unless that's maybe part of the deal. I don't know. But whatever. I think there's something unique there to what you're doing that could be cool. But I'd need to know more about your question on what does structure mean? Another good reason, again, to when you're working with somebody one-on-one, it does give you kind of like that asking questions of like, oh, here's what we're dealing with. Okay, let's deal with that. Great, done. Move on to the next thing. Move on to the next thing. On to the next thing. It really does escalate the kind of speed at which things get done. Okay, next question. AJ Coates. How do you build a plan to reach your goal? Sean's group post today challenged me to consider my plan of reaching $1 million in revenue for our online marketing agency. I don't have much of a plan beyond an annual goal of 10,000 a month of revenue, and I figured it out mindset. Not having a strong plan is clearly holding me back. I want to build this business. I want to be successful. I want to have the cash flow to take weekend trips to AO meetings without feeling guilty. How do I begin laying the groundwork for that goal? For that growth. Excellent question, and this goes for everybody because think of it this way. If you were an explorer coming to North America around like Columbus time or something like that. I'm really going off on a limb on this metaphor, so like if it goes out of control, it's not my fault. Well, it is my fault, but anyway, you're going out exploring, and you're going to the new world, as it were. And your main mission was to sail a certain amount of miles per day. I want to sail this many miles per day because that'll get me to my goals. It's 10 miles a day. I don't know, it's probably not too little, but it's 10 miles a day. So without a goal, without the direction, how do you know what direction to sail the 10 miles, right? You don't know which direction to go. So we all do that. We all say, I want $10,000 a month. And then that becomes the goal. But the $10,000 a month doesn't give you the perspective to know where to point the ship. So I totally agree with you. You have to have a system of setting a goal and then achieving the goal through activity that's planned. Because otherwise, you run into all sorts of problems, if you can even fortunate enough to run into the problems of growing in weird ways. Like a lot of times what happens is you just don't grow. So like, for example, in your case, what I would do, which is what I would do with everybody, is we would set a 10-year vision, whatever that looks like, because that gives me a perspective as an outsider. It would give all your employees and everyone else a perspective of where you're going. 10-year goal, 10-year vision, sometimes called a vivid vision, or painted picture was the old term. Cameron Herold is the guy who kind of literally wrote the book on that stuff. Do a vivid vision, then you break that down. This is EOS, traction, implementation sort of stuff. Then you go to a 3-year plan. Okay, if I'm going to be there in 10 years, where do I need to be in 3 years? Okay, I need to be at that number, and I need to be at all these other details of what that looks like, and I could help work through those specifics. It's revenue, it's profit, it's employee count, it's other kind of ratio stuff. If you want to do like real financial stuff, like current ratio, or like how many assets do you have? What's your capital structure? How much debt? How much equity? You can answer all those questions if you want to get into it. It's good. The more detailed, the better. That's your 3-year. Then you do a 1-year. Where do I have to be in 1 year to get to the 3-year? Using those same metrics again. Where does everything have to be? And then from that 1 year, we just focus on our quarterly objectives to get us there by the end of that 1 year. That's all there really is to it. And then based on those quarterly objectives, we establish weekly activities that get us to those quarterly activities, or get us to those quarterly outputs. And the thing there is so you can kind of start to see, right? Like now you know the actual steps you have to take to get to the goal. Now there's all kinds of financial modeling and stuff, which I also recommend is done, and it doesn't have to be super complicated. It just has to be like put it down on paper or put it into a spreadsheet. Because sometimes what people do is they'll establish a top line revenue goal and not do any thinking about how them like what their margins look like, or like how much do they have to spend on sales and marketing, and like what percentage of all of that eats up their profit. Like they don't think about any of that stuff. And it is helpful to think of those things ahead of time, because then it gives you a budget to know what you can spend. So like, for example, if you're selling a $100 item and you've allocated 20% of that $100 to sales and marketing related activities, when somebody comes and approaches you and says, hey, I got a great marketing thing, and you do the math based on the conversion rates and all these different things, and it turns out it's going to cost you $30 per close at best case scenario, you're not even going to want to do that. So you don't waste your time and you don't waste your money on that particular activity because you've already planned it all out. So, but anyway, you can start to see that when you lay out these plans, even if they don't execute exactly the way you think that they were going to, it gave you a starting point. Just like the ship crossing the ocean, you're kind of generally going in the right direction. You might be zigzagging all the way there, but you kind of know where you're going. And there might be some surprise, and there might be a storm, and you got to go around. Or you have to go, or you might get a setback. You have to go back in the other direction and then come back. But you always know what direction you're going. So, totally agree. 10 years, 3 years, 1 year, 90-day goal. I call them rocks. Long explanation of why that is. 90-day rocks, and then weekly activities to get to those, to make sure you get those rocks done. You make sure you get those 90-day goals done. All right, cool. That's a good question. Let's see. Quade Sturdy. What are the essential business systems all organizations need to thrive? I'm trying to scale my construction business as fast as possible. However, I must maintain a strong foundation. I would like to know what the most vital pillars are to build from the start. Step 1, culture. You need to have a definite and planned culture of what you want it to look like, and then what are the systems and processes to support that culture. Step 2, you need to have, like we were just talking about, goals. And you have to have a clear way of communicating those goals and connecting those goals to actions and activities. And that has to be a system, again, that's built into your business, that's functioning and clear across everybody who works there. Let's see, 3, on the finance side, you need to have a good finance person or people or team or however you end up doing it. You need to have somebody who's paying attention to the finances, who can look ahead, especially as you get bigger. When you're small, let's call it under $1 million, you don't have to look that far ahead. There's nothing that's going to come out of left field and whack you and put you out of business. But as you get bigger, if you don't keep looking ahead and you don't build that kind of financial robustness in your perspective of how money flows in and out of your business, you could be put out of business by success. You could become so successful that you actually go out of business and that you're broke and you have to sell your business to somebody else to merge with them in order to survive. I've seen it happen. So financial controls, financial systems are extremely important, especially as you grow. Let's see, what's the other thing that jumps to mind? I would also say that if you're a visionary type person, then you also need to have an integrator. If you're an integrator type person, you need to have a visionary type person. These are EOS terms. EOS being Entrepreneur Operating System, or Traction is the book if you want to read about it. So yeah, you should have a visionary integrator relationship. A visionary is the person who's kind of big picture, kind of painting the picture of where everybody, where we're going. An integrator is taking those things and making it reality. It's very hard to do that completely on your own. Other thing you have to do if you're going to scale, you need to have dedicated time to working on the business, not in the business. You're never going to get anywhere if you're constantly working in the business. And when I say in the business, I mean dealing with customers, making sales, driving, doing production stuff, dealing with particular projects. I'm talking about you need to spend dedicated time each week on things that are not related to daily activities, or even daily making sales for that matter, because that's also an in the business type activity. So dedicating on the business time weekly, and then trying to get as much on the business time as possible. So you become more and more a director of activity and a planner of activity than you are an actual doer, executor of activity. And eventually what you'd like to get to is you really want to get to capital allocation. That's really what our goals, like if you want to think about businesses scaling, what happens is people start out as entrepreneurs, which means they do everything themselves. And then from an entrepreneur, they become kind of like a manager of a bunch of people. So now they're a little bit more sophisticated, and they're still involved in all the day-to-day production stuff. And then they become like a director of or a process designer, I guess is maybe think about it. They elevate to that point where they're building the machine, they're building the system that operates, and they're kind of like putting all that stuff in place. And then that's kind of how it grows up. And then eventually what happens is they just become an allocator of capital. The companies get so big that they basically people are coming to them saying, hey, this is what I think needs to happen for the business. Here's how much it's going to cost. And they say yes or no. That's what they ultimately, like, that's really what you're trying to get to. Because the business has become so big and so complex that you can't really be involved in this like global picture anymore. It's more of just the dollars and the cents are kind of the metrics that kind of help drive things forward. So I don't remember why I jumped into that point, but you do have to spend time on the business, because that's the first step of moving away from entrepreneuring, which is just you doing everything. That's where everybody starts. Nothing wrong with that, but that's the next step is trying to get that on the business time, dedicated time. Don't get distracted by all the day-to-day stuff, or you could be stuck there forever. Okay, Nigel Macy. What do I need to have in place before I start bringing in other people to be franchisees of my business? I'm at the very beginning of starting a chair massage business. My ultimate goal is to move into a franchise. Okay, I know a little bit about this because Nigel and I have spoke about it before. So what I would recommend is for any franchise system or licensing system, because remember, franchises and licensing agreements are different. Franchises are much more complicated and expensive. Licenses give you less control as the licensor, but they're much cheaper to set up, and in many cases, perfectly adequate for those types of relationships. But in either case, you need to have a very clear documented system of how somebody makes money. Because nobody wants to be the franchisee of a company that doesn't make money. So you better have all of your ducks in a row as far as here's literally how one unit, like per unit economics, right? This single unit, this store, this chair, this whatever the unit is, has a documented and predictable process connected to it that produces revenue and profit. If you don't produce revenue and profit on a per unit basis, your franchisee is going to fail, and your franchise system is going to be garbage and won't get anywhere. So don't rush too fast to getting to bringing these other people in. Prove it out. Like what I would ask if I was a would-be franchisee person is show me your numbers. Show me some proof that you've actually done this and that it works. How long did it take for you? Like, how did you make the first deal in terms of location of the chair? How much does that cost? Okay, cool. How long does it take you for it to be profitable? Like once you install the chair, when cash flow starts coming in, how long does the cash flow take to ramp up? How long till profitability? How much cash investment do I need to make in order to support that structure until we become cash flow positive? I want to know all these details because not only because you hypothesize them, but because you actually did it once or twice or 3 times or 10 times, even better. The more times you did it, the more valuable your system is because that means it's predictable. There's a bunch of franchise companies that I'm involved with. One of them is through AO. And they've got 12 locations now, I believe. And it's pretty much like clockwork from the data that I've seen. They open a store, and within 6 to 9 months, they're cash flow positive, which is a great turnaround. So from an investment perspective, that's awesome. But they took the time. They took years doing it on their own, and then doing it with a few early adopter franchisees to figure that stuff out. So you got to get that stuff documented. You got to get it figured out. If you start giving it away too soon, there's another franchise group that I was involved in that I saw that were selling like $1 million franchises to people, and they would open them, and they would pretty quickly flounder and fail because there was no support from corporate, because corporate hadn't done it enough times or have enough stuff in order at the top to help those people succeed and make sure that they're successful based on the system, not based on just floundering around. So yeah, franchising and licensing, you've got to have all your stuff in a row. If you think you have to have all your stuff in a row as an individual company that doesn't have franchisees and licensees, it's 10 times more if you're going to have other people, because that's essentially what they're buying from you. They're buying those systems. All right, next question. Mariel Goodrich. How do I approach a brick and mortar restaurant about a potential partnership to use their liquor license? IL Bartend is a mobile mixology service. I started the business in spite of COVID in November 2020. I started it with the last of my savings after being out of work, out of my normal manager's salary for 9 months. My service is very different than any other mobile bar service. I do not want to do a crazy long description like I did in my last question. However, it is important to know that my ideas have been stolen time and time again in every business venture I have ever started. In the state of Florida, you must own a 150-seat restaurant already operating with a liquor license in order to obtain a mobile liquor license. Being that I do not have a restaurant, I have found a very creative ways to get around having a liquor license for private and public events. People keep encouraging me to reach out to restaurant owners and explain that I have found a giant hole in the market that needs to be filled. My fear is that as soon as I open my mouth, they will realize this is a huge need, purchase a few food trailers, and take my ideas. Why would they need me if they already have a license and deeper pockets than I do? I just learned tonight that an old friend of mine recently got his license, and I feel safer approaching him than anyone else. What would make it worth it for him to risk his license to partner with me? Okay, good questions. Okay, so where do we begin on this one? First, people, there's a million good ideas. There's a million good ideas. My recommendation to all entrepreneurs is get over the fact that someone's going to steal your idea, because they're not. Because an idea is like 0.5% of the way to success. The other 99.5% is execution, and brand, and culture, and vision. It's all these things. You know, it isn't the idea. I mean, I thought of Airbnb before Airbnb was Airbnb. I thought of YouTube before YouTube. I even actually executed on a YouTube type thing before YouTube was YouTube. And it failed. Did YouTube steal my idea? No, they didn't steal my idea. They just did it better than I did. They had better timing than I did, which is actually a lot more the case from studies, that the timing has a lot to do with it. If you're early, it's just as bad as being late. But the point is you got to get over that, because if you're not able to talk to anybody, you're not able to make any deals, you're not able to network, you're not able to have people help you if you're holding your idea so close that you can't. I mean, if you were a scientist doing some sort of R&D research and you discovered some sort of magic formula that does something or another, okay, you might want to keep that a secret, like trade secrets and patents and all that sort of stuff to follow that process. But service level ideas, for the most part, are going to be all about execution and networks and how to structure things than the idea itself. So just throwing that out there to maybe hopefully make it easier for you to approach people to talk about, hey, why don't we try to do this? Next thing is that whatever you're bringing, you have to answer that question. What are you bringing to the table? Why are you, like, you asked it, what would make it worth it for him to risk? I also am curious about what risk means. Why is he risking his license with you? What are you doing that's risky, or just the fact that he's partnering with you and there's risk in everything? Maybe that's all you mean. But you're already hit it on the head. What value do you provide? Because if it's just this idea, then it's not a lot of value. You do have to tell this person what value you provide to them, because that's what we do in our businesses. We have to tell people what value we provide to everybody. If you can't articulate that to people, whether it's your customers, your partners, or your employees, or your husband, your wife, like you need to be able to articulate the value that you provide to everyone around you, because otherwise they're not going to want to work with you, right? Like, there's no reason to work with you. People are very easy to figure out. If you can provide value for a cheaper price than you're charging, if I charge $100 for something, I better give greater than $100 worth of value, otherwise they're not going to buy it. It's the same thing in a partner relationship. If I come in and I say, hey, here's all the things you're going to give me, pretend there's a value, like some dollar amount associated with that, here's all the things you're going to give me, I need to be able to show how I'm giving them more value than that. If I'm giving them more value than that, it's very easy for them to say yes. You know, maybe what you say to people, this is just that jumps to mind, I don't know if this works or not, but what jumps to mind is, hey, restaurant owner person, the guy I know and 20 others, you have this liquor license, you spent a lot of money on it and it makes you money. I have a turnkey system that you can generate money from it outside of these four walls. You don't have to go deal with any of it. I deal with all that. All I need from you is XYZ forms and this relationship, and then I go generate revenue, and then we share in that profit together. And you don't have to do anything. So you're getting an additional marginal incremental revenue on something that was just producing this amount of revenue inside the four walls. That's what I would say to people. That's the business model I would create, because then why would they say no? Of course they would say yes. And then you might even articulate, well, and here are the risks, because it's good to articulate that, because that's a way to kind of like get ahead of it. Because if somebody says, oh, well, I'm worried about XYZ, well, I already thought of those things. Here's how I protect against those things, those risks as they were to this relationship. So you're coming at them with, here's what you're going to get, and you don't have to do any more work for it, and you don't have to make any investment for it in this particular case. Sometimes you might ask that, but in this case, and you're going to create this extra incremental revenue, which you didn't have before, which is basically all profit to you on something that you already own. That's a great thing. And then here's my list of risk and risk management procedures that are going to make this valuable to you. That's it. But you can only do that if you share your ideas and you openly talk to people about things. And if the world is so small that somebody takes your idea, kind of like the question from earlier about employees taking customers, I hope that when you build a business, if your business is not strong enough to be able to outdo an employee going off on their own, you really do need to pay attention to that. Like, that's really, I mean, you're going to lose one or two, and it's a pain, it's annoying, it makes you sad, and it pisses you off, but it's not going to kill your business. In fact, those customers a lot of times will come back because they'll realize that, oh yeah, I like that guy Joe, but Joe on his own was completely useless. It was the structure of the business that made Joe valuable, and I know now that it's the business that made the value, not Joe. But you got to talk openly about what your ideas are, because people can help you if you talk openly. Kristen Pitts, what type of POS system do you recommend using to track inventory, or should we keep things as is? Is there a big enough benefit to a uniform system? Should we invest in one to supply to all our shops? Majority of our golf course owners are older and don't want to upgrade their systems. Some courses are more up to date and would be open to it if it makes sense to upgrade. How would you handle a change like this for our course owners? What's in it for them? Thank you for your time. We merchandise 13 golf pro shops. The golf course owners outsource their shops to us to handle, and they get 15% cut profit of the merchandise sold. They write us a check each month for our 85%. We deliver, set out, remove old products, etc. Our staff is delivery and warehouse. We do not have staff at shops. They use their staff, golf pros, etc. to sell products. Each shop has their own POS system to handle everything in their course, including tee times, our retail, food systems, etc. Every course is unique. Some of them have created their own SKU numbers for our products. Others just have one single button for our products. A physical count inventory is done each month. We track everything on Excel to email and invoice each month. So I don't have a recommendation of a specific POS system. I'm sure you have some ideas already of that. But what jumps to mind is that if you're going to scale your business, you're going to have to create standards that everyone has to fit into. If I had to guess, of your 13 pro shops, I would guess that 20% of them generate you the majority of your revenue, and the other 80% don't. generate the other minority amount of revenue, and that those 80% also probably take up a lot of your time. So that all can be kind of many times, quote unquote, fixed with standardization. If you're running a bunch of different POS systems, if that's creating an issue, if you're not tracking inventory in a uniform way, and it could be done in a more specific way, like you're suggesting, that will save you time or maybe help you with like shrinkage or whatever, like if you're losing stuff, then yeah, if you're thinking of scale, things have to be standardized. Now, if you're tracking in Excel and that's working, and you think you could track that if you want to take your business, I always like to do this too. This is a great thought exercise if you're trying to do, like when you do your goal setting or you do these different things. Take where you're at. It's this Grant Cardone thing, and I don't like Grant Cardone, so don't let this be an endorsement. But I do like the 10x thing because I that's kind of an old academic trick. I mean, it happens in math all the time, right? Like if we're trying to do some really complicated math thing, and we want to figure out if the thing we just kind of figured out was useful or holds, we take it to the extreme, right? 10x it in Grant Cardone talk. 10x it, 100x it. What would we have to do? We have 13 golf pro shops now. What would happen if we had 130? Would your system work? If your Excel system would work at 130 pro shops, then maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the Excel system is the best system, and that's fine. But if at 20 pro shops the Excel system explodes when you think through that, then basically you need to figure out what the standardization of the POS systems and inventory process is going to be in order to grow the business. So it isn't really a question of like, oh, do they want to do it? Oh, do they not want to do it? The question is, if they are to remain a customer, they have to fit in this box. And if they don't fit in that box, then they are no longer a customer, or in this case, a partner, or however you define them. You have to create standards and processes and systems that are going to be able to get you to scale. And in that process, sometimes you end up having to boot people. In that process, you have to upgrade systems, as you're suggesting, that you might be forcing your customers or your vendors or whoever, partners, whoever these people are to you, that they might have to upgrade. And if they're not willing to upgrade, then maybe you actually say, yeah, then this isn't the right relationship for us anymore because this is the direction we're going. You have to be specific in how you want your business to grow. You have to set that picture and then execute towards that picture. Otherwise, you don't scale. That's the plus and the minus of a big company, right? A big company is able to produce huge amounts of revenue and huge amounts of profit because they use all standard systems. Everything is standard. Everything is planned out and executed like a big machine, a big money-making machine. That's all business is. It's a big money-making machine. And then, of course, the risk is as you become bigger and bigger, then you run into these bureaucratic problems and they aren't nimble and you're not able to adjust to changing environments and all that sort of stuff. But that's a whole other group of people that I talk to with those issues. You guys are on the other side. You guys are on the nimble side, but you have to be moving more towards standardization, more towards deciding what you want your business to look like structurally, and then making everything fit into that structure. And if the things you have right now, some of them don't fit in that structure, you got to go out in the world and find the right fits. Okay, that's it. I'm completely out of questions. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you guys. Reach out to Sean if you guys want any one-on-one time with me or anybody else through AO. We're always willing to jump in and have a conversation. And then, of course, if that conversation goes well and there's time, it never hurts to have us visiting together more than just once in a while. on those weekly meetings really are valuable for those who have done it. Okay, that's it. Have a good day. Reach out if you need anything, but we'll see you guys all later. Have a good one. Thanks.